All right, we are rocking and rolling. How are you doing, Lolo?
Amazing. And how are you, Perry?
I am good. I am in an echoey room, so I really apologize if my sound quality is horrible, but we are in the process of moving, and so
It
yeah.
gives you that Wizard of Oz, like the booming kind of effect. It's good. It
Mm, mm.
works.
I am the great and powerful Oz. Do not look behind the curtain. Uh, so yeah, it's fun. At least I have like a blank wall behind me today, so that's exciting. But otherwise, yeah, we're in a weird transition period, and it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Stuff is coming
I'm
along.
excited.
I am very excited for stuff that's gonna be coming up in the next couple of months. Um, yeah. But what I'm also excited about is our episode today, where we are going to be talking about Mosiah 7 through 17. And this is
So
like the
exciting.
first narrative section that would have been dictated in the Book of Mormon as we have it today. So we covered the first
Yeah.
sermon, right? Now we're going to be covering like the first real narrative. And honestly, I kind of dig Mosiah. Like it's fun. I
Yeah.
enjoy this section in
I
kind of
do
a
too.
perverse way. Like it's just it's wild. It's fun. Um and it's fun in a way that I don't think the small plates ever quite rise to. Uh,
No.
which is it's unfortunate that as Joseph becomes a better author, that the narrative just
Yeah.
kind of loses some of that quality, some of that steam. Mm.
Not yeah.
Anyway,
Not as Tarantino. A little more documentary.
yeah, and it's like through like the first half of Alma, like Mosiah through the first half of Alma is just a blast. I love it. Then Alma just becomes a
Yes.
slog, which is awkward when you're in the war chapters. It's like, oh, anyway,
Right. How is the
uh,
war parts boring? Come on.
right? Anyway, let's dive into this. Let's get into
Woo!
this, and let's talk about Seers. So we have this section in Mosiah 8. So just to set the scene a little bit, we have Ammon, who is this scout from Zarahemla, who's going into the land of Nephi under the orders of Mosiah II. And he's going to meet with King Limhi, who is the head of the people who are living in the land of Nephi, of the Nephites who are now living in the land of Nephi under the bondage, under the vassalage of the Lamanite kings. And Ammon sits in front of this king, and they're having this conversation back and forth about stuff. And Limhi realizes that Ammon is legit, that he's a good dude, that he's coming from Zarahemla, and he's like, oh my goodness, so we've got all this stuff, and this cool stuff has happened, and hey, we found these 24 plates, and we don't really know like what they say, and I'd love to know what they say. And yeah, like this is cool, right? And basically what had happened is Limhi had tried to send a scouting mission to find Zarahemla, and they were going north. And instead of going west, as would have led them into Zarahemla, they go east, and that ultimately results in them arriving at the kind of the southern edge of the land of desolation. Um, and
Right.
the land Bountiful is kind of around there as well. They would have kind of gone through Bountiful into desolation, and
So exactly like Utah.
pretty much, yeah, pretty much. So when we start talking about like Book of Mormon geography and all that, and how like the new world geography is consistent and all that, I just want to express how actually really simple the new world geography is. You have Nephi to the south, north of that, and kind of to the northwest, you have Zarahemla, and then just to the east of Zarahemla, you have Bountiful. If you go through Bountiful, you'll eventually arrive at Desolation, which sits on the north end of all this. And with those vague borders in mind, you can kind of fit a whole lot of different geographic models. And this is the first dabbling in that. Notice that Bountiful
Right.
doesn't get described in any of this or all that actually in this particular part of the text because it hasn't been
Right.
discovered yet. It's not in the narrative. Okay. Point being, they find these 24 Jaredite plates. They want them translated. They're like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
can you figure out what they say? Ammon's like, I can't figure out what they say, but I do know a dude who can because he's a seer and he's our king. He's the seer king. He's Mosiah II, the seer king. By the way, that was a Hebraism.
Oh, that's impressive.
You repeat things over and over again. You just add a little bit
Over
more
and over.
detail, and that's a Hebraism. Clearly, I am an ancient prophet. Um,
Obviously.
so upon upon learning about Mosiah II's like gift of seership, Limhi is like, dude, seers are friggin' awesome. They're the best. They are clearly better than prophets. And Ammon is like, you know, a seer is pretty cool. Seers are prophets and revelators also, and there isn't a greater gift that anyone can have. Now, this section is a little bit sus when you realize that Joseph Smith, the person doing this whole dictation process, was well known to be a seer, that within his milieu, he was understood to be a seer. And
pearls clutched, you don't say.
I know we do have this through line of Joseph, like really kind of talking himself up in these positions. What I suspect is going on here is that we don't have Joseph. We have Joseph Smith including within the role of a seer, sort of this like prophetic and revelatory role. But I don't think I'm with Dan Vogel a little bit that I don't think that at this point he was conceiving himself as being like the head of this like church at this point. Like I don't think that idea had yet crystallized when he dictates this section. And I think that that's pretty consistent with the scholarship and some of the writings at this point. We have in Doctrine and Covenants, at least in like, oh, sorry.
Who would, no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to, who would he have envisioned as the leader then?
I don't really know that he necessarily saw it going that way. Like this could have been like a charismatic type thing. It could have been Oliver Cowdery as the person who's like his next immediate parallel and all of that. But I don't even think he was like aware of Oliver Cowdery at this point. I don't think that he really had the idea yet of doing a church. Just kind of a movement of like, here we're going to like be restoring true ideas. I think that this is an idea that's working its way into evolution. And he's still kind of figuring out the ins and outs of all that. I just don't think that he envisions himself at the head of a church just yet.
That makes sense.
That is going to come along. But like at this point in time, he's getting revelations that are saying that he should not pretend to any other gift other than translating, right? Like this is the one thing that he is going to be able to do. It's not until later on that revelation that says that he should pretend to no other gift gets amended to say, but if the Lord God, decide to give him more stuff to do, then it's within my permissions to do that, right? Like
he got this.
That is a later edit. The first version of that revelation says that he should pretend to no other gift whatsoever, and that's in line with this gift of seership. And this is still kind of elevating himself, right? He's still putting himself at that higher position. All of that is like an interesting thing. It's an interesting issue. But I think there's something that's kind of even more pertinent to the modern church. We're not a church history podcast, but I do like to explore the implications for like modern Mormonism.
Agreed.
And I think I do think it's important to point out where Joseph Smith is also inserting himself into the text. And this is one of those places. Later on in the dictation process in 2nd Nephi, in a section we've already covered, Joseph puts himself, I think, in kind of a higher role even then, where he is like this foreordained, pre-prophesied prophet who is going to bring forth this great and marvelous work and this wonder, where here he just has the greatest gift that anybody can receive. And I feel like this is actually a little bit more humble and a little bit more modest.
I mean, gosh. Just the greatest gift ever,
right? Now, this prophet, seer, revelator type verbiage, I think, is the most probable source of what we use in the sustaining vote in the LDS tradition for the Q15, where they are sustained as prophet, seers, and revelators. I think that this is the earliest source of that. And I don't think that there's another spot where it actually appears in the text quite so clearly. But that does raise the question, what exactly is a seer? Now, when we have like Joseph Smith's milieu, what we have is this person who basically is able to grab a seer stone or some sort of device, some sort of magical implement that allows him to see things. It is somebody who sees hidden knowledge and is able to bring that forth, is able to reveal that. The Book of Mormon gives an even more specific definition. And in Mosiah 8:13, that definition is whosoever is commanded to look in the interpreters. The same is called seer. Basically, the person who is commanded to look into something that is used for this role of interpreting these seer stones. Mosiah's seer stones are called the interpreters. That eventually gets rolled into this idea of Urim and Thummim, though that is a later innovation. That is not in the Book of Mormon. That is not a Book of Mormon designation. That is a later innovation onto what the text claims. But somebody who is able to take these stones, these interpreters that bring to light hidden knowledge, someone who is commanded to look into them, the same is called seer. And I want to be very clear that this is saying is that it is the person who is commanded to do so, not authorized, not given permission, not given the office of, not with the authority of so doing. No, there's no such language. This is a commandment to look into the interpreters. That is who is called a seer. So when the Q15 are sustained as prophets, seers, and revelators, the implicit claim is that Russell M. Nelson, Dallin H. Oaks, Jeffrey R. Holland, all the way down to whoever the newest guy is, at Patrick Kieran or whatever, that those guys are commanded by the Almighty God of the universe to look into the interpreters and bring to light knowledge of things which are past and things which are to come. That this is not an authorization.
Pressure.
This is not an authorization. This is not authority. This is a commandment.
Do this.
If they are not fulfilling that particular commandment, if they are not actually doing that action, they are derelict in that responsibility, which raises the question, should they be sustained as seers? Now, I would contend that if they are not actually fulfilling this commandment, that would suggest that they are in violation of the commandments of the Almighty God of the universe, and maybe they should not be sustained as fulfilling that particular role.
So would this be, so this was when we were pre-gaming, how would we know? Like, would they say, I received this revelation via my Dallas Cowboys baseball cap and some rocks I found outside? Or would they say, how would we know if they are seeing versus prophesying?
So
I guess is my question.
Yeah. So if we use Joseph Smith kind of as a model for this, it can be obvious. It can be public. It can be displayed. The whole reason why the Hiram Page conflict shows up is because this stuff was publicly done. It was publicly understood that this was going on.
So this wouldn't be a holy of holies situation.
This is not a holy of, there is nothing in the scriptural record to even suggest that this would be a holy of holies situation. Right? But at the very least, they could say, like, hey, we received this information by using the gift of seership. Like, we were sitting in, they could claim, if they wanted to be sitting in the Holy of Holies, using the seer stone in whatever manner they feel is appropriate for them to be using the seer stone, or their interpreters or whatever. And they could claim to be bringing to light some knowledge. And if that knowledge of things which are past, or that knowledge of things which are to come, bears fruit, is shown to be true, by their fruits ye shall know them, right? If that knowledge is shown to be true, then we would know then that they are exercising that gift and that it is a true gift. Like, we would have that evidence. We would have that indication.
Well, like you were saying in the pregame, that would have made COVID go a lot easier.
Right? I mean, imagine if in October of 2019, when Russell M. Nelson, seer, had said something to the effect of, hey, the next April conference, nobody's going to be coming to the center because there's going to be, a pestilence that will afflict the land. And, this is a thing which is to come. You need to be prepared for this. Start working on making sure that your food storage is up to date, that your debts are paid off, stock up a bit now on toilet paper, get some medical grade masks now. Because we don't want our people to be impugning on the supply chain. We want to make sure that we're protecting the supply chain. If we do this now, we're not going to be the issue. We're good, and we can actually help others to be prepared as well. Those in our communities that need to be aware of this. And this is going to be coming in a few months' time. We'll start to see the signs of this, roiling and all that, and eventually it's going to be an issue. And the Lord wants us to be prepared for that. And I have received this knowledge by the gift of seership as I was meditating upon my seer stone in the Holy of Holies. Like, that would be fantastic evidence of, like, could you imagine?
He might have
like,
left the Dallas Cowboys hat at home.
He might have left well, we do already have video of Russell M. Nelson seer staring into a stovepipe hat to show us how Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon. So
Oh, see, that's the problem. No, it's got to
yeah,
be a Dallas Cowboys ball cap. Come on,
you keep saying that,
guys.
but but the Dallas Cowboys are set. They never win, so we don't want losers here.
I'm a hockey fan anyway, so it doesn't matter. I know the rules of football are grab ball and run, and then everybody hugs in a pile for a little while, and then everybody gets back up and does it again. That's all I know.
And you have to do it in just the tightest pants possible. There's
a benefit to watching sports.
There is a benefit to watching sports, and can we just acknowledge that like pretty much every sport is quite homoerotic?
I played softball. That's accurate in college, especially.
Yes, queen.
I would not have been following the BYU guidelines, and that's why I went to SMU.
I'll need to share with you a picture of somebody who was following the BYU guidelines. Anyway, let us just say that there are things which are to come, which are revealed in this particular.
Did you use your baseball cap and find that out?
Oh,
some gravel from the.
It is revealed by the gift of BYU football.
Not all the youngs were that hard to look at.
And with that in mind,
moving on.
Moving back to the topic at hand, Sears.
Sears and Revelators.
So, yeah, this honestly was one of my shelf items as I was processing, kind of deconstructing the church. Like, honestly, I came across this and was like, this is what the Book of Mormon says that a seer is supposed to be. I don't see them doing it. I do not see them fulfilling this particular definition of what a seer is. And this is the doctrinal definition of a seer. To my knowledge, the Doctrine and Covenants does not modify this at all. This is it. This is the definition of a seer.
I will tell you, I just finished D&C. It does not.
Yeah, I mean, I am no expert in the Doctrine and Covenants. I've read it a few times, and that's about as far as I go with expert in that text. I'm much more familiar with the Book of Mormon, and this is it. This is the definition of a seer. Doesn't show up in the Bible. Doesn't show up. This is it. So if they are not meeting this particular definition of a seer, I do not think they should be sustained as seers.
I agree.
Yeah, I have said as much to a stake president before, and that argument was interesting. Anyway.
So my question is this. I know that like if it's the ward and we're sustaining the new bishop and it's like all opposed, yay, all those say no or whatever. What happens if somebody says no in the conference center when we're doing that? Like, what if I stand up and they're like, Dallin A jokes or whatever, and I'm like, no, he's a dick. I don't want to do that. I don't want to say yes. What do we do?
I can tell you from firsthand experience. I mean, not in the conference center, but I can tell you from firsthand experience what happens if you are at like a meeting in which the brethren are to be, taken for a sustaining vote, and you raise your hand in an opposing vote. So if the stake president is there, and if the stake president knows who you are, the stake president may decide to acknowledge that particular vote was made and to offer to speak with that individual in basically a meeting afterwards.
Right.
You then have an opportunity to talk to your stake president about the reasons why. And from there, nothing happens. You may be threatened. You might be threatened with a disciplinary council. That it is possible that you will be threatened with a disciplinary council, as happened to me at that point. So
I'm so glad that they took your vote to heart. And Fizzy, sorry. We have a bug zapper and mosquitoes, and she's just very concerned about the zapping.
Yeah, there's no room for actual criticism. And Nemo the Mormon has done a lot more on this than I have. This was a one-time thing, but yeah, I can tell you from firsthand experience that this is the
Wow.
sort of thing that does happen. Um, and in all honesty, like if you were to convince me that the Book of Mormon was true and like all of that, this would still be like one of those issues where I would be raising my hand in an opposing vote. Like
Yeah.
even as
No,
a
no, I
faith,
totally
like
agree.
you could restore my faith in like all like basically everything, and this would
Mhm.
still be a sticking issue because it's just in the doctrine. It's just there.
It's a black and
Um,
white thing. It's not a
I,
gray area.
I can't get around this one. Like this is just one of those issues I cannot resolve. When I raise the objection of like I don't know how to go from the Book of Mormon is true to therefore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true and living church on the earth, like because of some like
Mhm.
gaps and issues. That's one thing, and there's some gray space to play in with all of that. This I can't
Yeah.
resolve. I don't have any way to gray zone this one. This one seems like a smoking
Well,
gun issue to me
yeah,
against
I mean
the
it's black and
current
white.
LDS church. Yeah,
There's no gray. It's not like, oh, I can misinterpret this. It
no,
lays it out.
it's
So
it's there. It's explicit. It's very
yeah,
very
yeah.
clear what's going on. Now, if they were to be sustained as prophets and revelators and not
That's
seers,
different.
completely different,
Totally
right?
different.
So it's not like I'm saying that they can't be sustained as prophets or seer or prophets or revelators. That I'm not making the objection on here. In
Right.
this that's a different conversation with more gray space to play in. What I am saying is that as seers, I do not think they can be sustained.
No, agreed.
And remaining consistent with the Book of Mormon. I think that those are mutually exclusive things. I don't think you can remain consistent with the teachings of the Book of Mormon and sustain
Mhm.
the Q15 in the LDS tradition as seers. I'm hoping that nuance is clear. That
Yeah.
of what I'm saying. Like
Well,
you
and
can
if
sustain
they
it if you
have
want
the
to.
ability, if they have the ability to be seers, their commandment and their station, their reason is because they are meant to be part of the Q15. And based on the pregame and also everything we've discussed here, being a seer and getting information via that method is going to be more accurate and more, not accurate, but detailed than a prophecy. Why would they not be using that gift? If they're supposed to be
And
leading us, this is going to be the most effective way to do it. Why not just do it?
right, and if we can talk about efficacy, and I feel that's a little bit gray when we talk about efficacy, but it's an important point. What's black and white is that they are explicitly commanded to do this. If they are
And they're not
seers,
doing it.
they are commanded to do this, and if they're not doing it, they're sinning. It's a sin. It's a
Right.
violation of the commandments of God.
And my point is, when your uncle pulls the coin from behind your ear, if it's really magic, he could do it forever. If it's a
Mhm.
trick, he's not going to be able to do it forever. So if they really have this power that they declare, why not use it?
Right,
Why aren't we using it?
right.
So something's got to give. There's no way. There's no other way around it.
Mhm.
I'm to basically support your point.
Yeah. And if they're derelict in that responsibility, if they're committing the sin of not fulfilling that responsibility to the that is obligated under the position which they hold, I don't know another way around that. I don't know how else to resolve that other than to say they should not be sustained
No,
as
agreed.
seers. Again, so I need to be I need to be clear and explicit in what I am contending. It's the sustaining vote for seership that is under discussion, that is under contention here.
Right. You're not
Uh,
discussing the prophet. You're not
not
discussing the revelator. Right.
exactly, exactly. Not that
And
those issues are not under scrutiny here. It is that
right.
specifically as seership, and unfortunately, the nature of the vote does not allow you to get into that level of nuance. It is a binary
Right.
yay nay on those points as a bundle, and so
Right.
yeah, your vote should be opposed if you want to stay consistent with the Book of Mormon. Your vote should be opposed to prophets, seers, and revelators, and then sit down with your stake president and explain exactly what it is that you're opposing.
Right.
And that it's like I don't have a problem with them as prophets or revelators, like that seems to be fine or whatever. Like if you want to,
Yeah.
because we could get into how they're doing on those particular roles as well. But this one,
They're doing great. Just
it's
super.
frankly more, it is frankly more gray on those particular roles. This one is black and white. They're not doing it
Yeah.
like just according to the Book of Mormon. This is something that I think you could be a perfectly good and faithful member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and raise your
And still say
opposing
nay to
vote
this.
on this. Yeah, because it's just not consistent with the Book of Mormon. I would actually contend that you're being even more faithful to the tradition of the church if you're doing that, because you are supporting exactly what the text of the most holy, the most correct book of any book is saying. So
Written by the most super special guy ever.
Written by the most super special guy ever, of course, with the greatest of all gifts.
Yes, accurate, 100%.
Yep.
That seems totally right.
All right. So
no, I'm agreeing with
you. I think that point is hopefully clear and sufficiently controversial. And we can go into something that's, much lighter. So let's.
Oh, and a shout out to my Uncle Gary for always coming in clutch with the ear quarters. So, just
your Uncle Gary. Your Uncle Gary is clearly a witch, and we will discuss what happens to witches later.
Look at you.
Foreshadowing.
Nice.
Okay. So was it last week, the week before? We were talking about Omni, and we got into the end of Omni. It's been 2 weeks, right? We talk about Amaleki and how Amaleki has this brother. And something we didn't discuss in the pregame. I'm gonna go to something here. So in RFM's episode this last week, if anybody watched RFM's special on the Book of Mormon, the Come Follow Me section there, he talks about how you have it in the large plates, most likely what would have been passed down is just this line of kings. And you got this whole question of, you got the Nephites, and then all of a sudden you have Mosiah, and then Benjamin, and then Mosiah again. It's like, why did these kings' names get changed all of a sudden? What's the deal here? And then he talks about how like the small plates and the large plates are blind to each other and the succession and all that. And one of the points that he notes is that the small plates are only used for as long as they need to be used and no longer. And all you need to do is get to Benjamin, right? Because that's where Mosiah 1 starts. You need to get to Benjamin. And once you've done that, you're good. And then you can abandon the small plates. And he's got this, he notes that where you have Amram passing the plates over to Chemish, you have basically a brother passing the plates to a brother because he doesn't have seed. And then when you get to Amaleki, he does not mention passing the plates to a brother. Well, the reason why, actually, I think that this is clever on Joseph Smith's part, is that he does name a brother. Amaleki explicitly names a brother who potentially could have received the plates instead of him. And that is the brother that travels with Zeniff. Because that brother left with Zeniff and is not available to take the plates anymore, Amaleki decides to give the plates to Benjamin instead.
Absolutely.
Thus resolving the issue that RFM presented about like why the small plates are then passed over at that point instead of going to a brother within the narrative, though it still does not solve the larger like metatextual issue of why are the small plates only used for as long as they're needed and not a moment longer.
I was going to say, that's very specific.
It's incredibly specific. Okay,
like,
so
this letter will self-destruct.
It is to that point, right? So Zeniff departs during the days of Mosiah II. Mosiah the First. Right. So this is like early on. It's like it's either at like the end of Mosiah the First reign or like in the early days of King Benjamin. We're talking like quite a ways back, and so. And Mosiah 1 happens like at the end of Benjamin's life and going into the early part of the reign of Mosiah II. Just to kind of, help to make sense a little bit of the timeline. Now, Amaleki tells the story of Zeniff and his excursion into the land of Nephi, his expedition into the land of Nephi, and the ultimate like disappearance of those people from the perspective of the people in Zarahemla. Zeniff tells the story from his own perspective. We have 2 accounts of the exact same story. That comprises about a total of 8 verses. 4 verses in Omni, 4 verses in Mosiah 9. From that point, the Zeniff account just is too different to call it the same story anymore. he's just talking about different things. It's just it's his own story. It's his own account
Mhm.
of events, and we no longer have that overlap with what Amaleki is talking about.
We're right.
So where we had the overlap, we're going to take a look and actually compare. So Amaleki, in his version of the story, says that all of the people that go on this first expedition into the land of Nephi are slain, except for 50. He numbers exactly the number of survivors. Zenith, who is actually there, whose account is actually like a first-person account of the events that are occurring, who interestingly uses language that's pretty similar to Nephi, does
What
not
a shock.
offer. He does not offer a number of survivors. Oh, you think I'm kidding about like how like specific this is too? Like seriously, like give me just 1 second here to pull up Mosiah 9
yeah.
and like
remember.
read how similar Zenith is to Nephi.
Yeah.
I Zenith, having been taught in all the language of the Nephites and having had a knowledge of the land of Nephi or the land of our father's first inheritance, like seriously, the beginning of his records, like I Nephi, having been born of goodly parents and having been taught in the language of my father.
Ancient time, copy and paste, man.
This is so. How do you have multiple authors? Like seriously, how do you come up with multiple authorship theories at all? This is it's one author. Anyway, so Zenith does not offer a number of survivors, which is odd, right? The more detailed account should be the first-person account of the person who's there,
Right.
not the guy who's offering a brief summary of events of something that happened to somebody else.
Right.
It's odd.
My sister's cousin's dog walker said.
So there's not like a logical impossibility here. This could have been this way. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
We also have Amaleki who's writing on like the, kind of like he's getting into the margins of the tiny little bit of what's left of the small plates. And he's writing down this last little bit of what he can possibly fit in. And he includes this detail that is not included in the large plates. So the next is that, so neither account will actually name who the leader is of the first expedition. It's just notable to me anyway that Zenith himself, who leads the second expedition, isn't named at all in Amaleki's account. And I think that this is just showing the drift in like memory. Joseph has Zenith named for as long as he needs him, and then once he no longer needs him, he doesn't name him.
Just like the small plates, not a moment longer.
Just like the small plates, not a moment longer. In Amaleki's version, the leader of the first army, that's the first expedition, is the cause of the contention. He is explicitly the cause of the contention. He is the source from which this contention that results in all but 50 being slain comes from. Zenith has a bit more nuance, and I find this interesting mostly because this is the earlier the earlier writing. But then when we remember that Joseph was probably exhausted by the time he gets to Amaleki's story and just wants the thing to be done, this actually makes a certain kind of sense. Zenith seems to take a little bit of the blame. He seems to accept that he's a little bit responsible for bringing up this conflict. He even accepts that he's overzealous in trying to obtain the land of Nephi. But he does also say that the leader of this Nephite army is bloodthirsty. He's somebody who wants to like kill the Lamanites, and Zenith doesn't want to do that. He wants to live peaceably in the land of Nephi with the Lamanites, which is, it's decent. He's going to do like a complete 180 on that by the end of this, by the way. He's going to be like, they're like bloodthirsty and warring people. Like, they're horrible. Like
colonizer extreme.
I hate these people. They are the worst. Like he goes the opposite direction in 10.
Yeah.
But at least at this part, he's like, yeah, they seem like good, decent people. I want to live with them. I want to live in their lands. I'm good with paying vassalage to the king of the Lamanites and doing all of that. But yeah, Mosiah 10, he's just going to completely do a 180 on that.
I mean, it was a hard few weeks. I get it. I get it.
And then, so the first expedition is Amaleki makes it seem like this entire purpose, this whole going into the land of Nephi, is for the purpose of possessing it. He uses the term possess. It seems like it's more like what the second expedition was all about. The first expedition is explicitly militant, and that characterization doesn't show up at all in Amaleki's version of the account. It just, There's no sense that this is an army. But Zenith is a
Yeah.
spy in an army. Like his job is to basically weaken the defenses of the Lamanites or find where they're vulnerable. So that way this army of the Nephites can come in and through military conquest, take back possession of the land of Nephi. This is
Sure.
just not present in a Malachi story
At all.
So, right. So these are not like logical or like logically inconsistent like stories that would prove as a smoking gun that this like did not historically happen, right?
Right.
This is also kind of has some, or this also has some indications of being not a historically accurate rendering of whatever events did or did not transpire here.
Right.
But it is quite consistent with the idea that we are developing the story first in Mosiah, then coming back later and solely off of memory, trying to briefly summarize what was written before without producing contradictions. Where we're trying to do that, but also kind of failing a little bit because human memory is flawed, and we can't go back and look at our old notes, right? Like this is perfectly consistent with the single authorship models of the Book of Mormon. It's not consistent with the Spalding-Rigdon theory.
Wife took them.
This is not consistent with the Spalding-Rigdon theory, where the Spalding-Rigdon theory would actually allow for some like new, allow for the story to have gone back and had revisions and all of that, for there to be a source manuscript that tells this story like in an explicit way, like all of that. It's not consistent with that. It is consistent with the sole authorship of like, this is just off of Joseph Smith's head. He is producing this. He gets to the end. He's tired. He's exhausted. He just wants to be done with this project. And he's going to recount the story. And just none of the details are going to basically actually line up. But the broad strokes of the story are going to be there such that it serves the purpose that's needed to now connect the small plates to the large plates. Because the only reason why this is apparently here is so that way we have an excuse to give the small plates over to Benjamin instead of to Amaleki's brother.
That makes sense. I mean, it doesn't, but it does.
Okay.
It just seems like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I got to give Joseph credit. Like, it is clever. I mean, this
really
goes into the whole thing. This goes into the whole thing of it being really clever. It just doesn't work out, but like it is clever. And I get what he was trying to do, and I have to give credit for what he was attempting to do. His success in that effort is yeah.
And Ziff
Let's talk about
always
Ziff.
Remind me of the little green guy from Futurama. The little
Kith.
alien guy. His name is Kith. Kith. Okay, I was close.
Yeah. Kith.
I was close.
He's great. He's a great character. Okay. In Mosiah 11, we have the wicked King Noah taking over for his son Zenith, his overzealous, or for his father, his overzealous father Zenith, and Noah decides that he wants to use his kingship to become rich, and so he taxes all the people 1/5 of everything, their gold, their silver, their wheat, and their ziff. Okay, so what is ziff? Because this is one of those cases where we have just like what's supposed to be a transliterated word taken right off the plate. So this should be a Hebrew or Reformed Egyptian word of some kind, right? This should be a Lehite, Nephite word transliterated. And so what is it? Well, the Book of Mormon itself in the 2013 edition has a footnote that says that ziff corresponds to a Hebrew word that means to like be shiny or to be plated. And apologists like Sorensen agree with this. And what that word is it's rendered as ZIW if we transliterate this Hebrew word. And that is also the name of the second month of the Hebrew calendar. And that you can see in 1 Kings 6:37, where in 1 Kings 6:37 in the KJV, it is spelled ZIF, 1F.
So this is something Joseph would have had.
In theory, if he read 1 Kings 6:37, he would have seen this. It's possible that then sat in the back of his mind, and as he's going through the process of automatic writing or trans writing, ziff pops into his head. But also these are sounds that when English speakers are just making stuff up, they kind of tend to go with. Z sounds are really common in that, especially Z on the lead for an English speaker to if they're just making stuff up to if they want to make it sound exotic or different. Yeah, a Z sound is one
Add
of
the
those
Z.
ways of trying to get that. You either do that with Z's or with like one that I favor as a writer actually is like X's. Because if I'm wanting to make especially like a harsh sort of exotic sound,
Yeah.
X is a sound that I'll favor. And yeah, you've seen my book before, and if you think to like some of the names in there, yeah,
That's true. That's true. That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
but yeah, there's one that like I note that I do. I don't
Well, and it's
favor
not like,
Z's as much, but yeah, they're
yeah.
there as well. I do have Z's in mine as well. So
Well, it's not like Joseph had the Twilight series to fall back on. I mean, literature, not a whole lot of books for him to choose from. So you're going to read what you got over and over.
you're gonna read what you got. And he's got the Bible. He's got Captain Kidd, dime novels, probably. He's got some other stuff, possibly the late war and other things that he can pull from. But I try to be a minimalist as much as possible. I'm going to go with the Bible. He's got the KJV.
Yeah.
As much as possible when I'm trying to model how Joseph Smith came up with this stuff, I wanted to, I try to stay just to the KJV because I know he had that. As much as apologists are trying to make it so he didn't have that, I have to laugh at them because it's like, if you want Joseph Smith history to be true, he has to have a Bible. So
he has to have had a Bible.
He has to have had
and
a
even
Bible.
his mother is like, Joseph reads it all the time, and they do little plays and stuff. Like,
she's a little bit inconsistent with some of that, where she tries to say that he's like not predisposed to reading as much as the other kids and all of that. There's good indication that the kid read. Yeah,
I mean, even if he can only read at a negative 8th grade level, he's got nothing but time. He's going to read the Bible. He doesn't have Netflix.
He's going to read the Bible. If we want his own history to be true, if we want the history of his first vision to be true, we have to accept the fact that he read the Bible a lot. And if we don't care about that, it's what he had access to. And
right.
It's certainly, we then have to explain the Book of Mormon, right? And the Book of Mormon is just has so many literary dependencies on the Bible. Yeah. From both naturalistic and from believing perspectives, the idea that he read the Bible, had access to the Bible is consistent. Now, does that level of awareness of the Bible translate to him being aware of 1 Kings 6:37 to the extent that he would have used that sound as something to transliterate into his text? That's a bit of a stretch to me. I think that goes a little bit too far above and beyond. But with what I understand of automatic writing and how it's capable of kind of taking what your brain wants to do anyway, and then also producing things.
I was going to say it just pulls from what's
that are just
in
kind
there.
of there. Like, I think he probably had read Kings at some point, and so it's possible that he would have pulled this Ziff reference from there. I think it's notable that there are 2 Fs as well. In this,
would
in this
that be
English
just because he forgot?
Well, I don't think that. So we could go with like English spelling wasn't standardized or anything like that. There's plenty of possible explanations we can run with, but sometimes having double consonants like that is significant. Does this mean that instead of like the ZIW rendering, it should be ZIWW? I don't know, and I don't know if that would be consistent with like Hebrew spelling or things like that, because I'm not a scholar of Hebrew in any stretch. And so I'm not really trying to make claims. I'm just trying to say I don't know that this Ziff is even consistent with this Hebrew word. I think that you are the apologists at that point are making a bit of a leap that they don't have founded because we don't have like the source text. We don't really have intermediate text. We don't really necessarily have a reason to think that this is a Hebrew word as such. We're just asserting that because it happens to fit pretty well with a Hebrew word. And then we can take one particular little meaning of that Hebrew word and try to have it mean something else that's significant to us for our purposes. But it's all motivated reasoning that leads to that point. It's not actually driven by the text. Now, what does Sorensen want this to be? Because Sorensen is not just going to be content with saying, hey, it lines up with a Hebrew word, and so yay, isn't that great? No, he wants this to be something. So what he proposes, and this is according to an article on Fair, he proposes that Ziff could be Tumbaga, or tin or mercury. Now, if it's tin or mercury, that's a problem because both of those metals were like within the awareness of Joseph Smith's milieu. He should have been able to translate tin or mercury directly rather than doing this transliteration.
I was going to say to write it.
it
The
has
10,
weird
yeah.
it has really weird implications for some of the other apologetics, like if we get to curlums and kumums, or to like the various types of grains or anything like that that also get mentioned around here, which I think I skipped over. It's really just emblematic of that same problem, right? Because if we try to fit it in with some known substance that would have been available within Joseph Smith's milieu, then we have to wrestle with, well, why didn't he just translate the word
Why
then?
didn't you just call it that? Yeah.
Which then gets into loose versus tight translation problems. And this is clearly one of those like signs of tight translation being intended
Yeah.
by the text, that this is a translation of exactly what was rendered within the text. It doesn't work as well with loose. So that would kill the loose translation side of it, especially if it's tin or mercury. Like,
Right.
why didn't you just translate this? Why did you transliterate it if it's this thing? And like a loose translation should have been able to handle that with no problems whatsoever. And a
Right.
tight translation
Exactly.
should have also been able to do it, but at least it's a little bit closer to that. Okay.
No, that
So
makes sense.
Tumbaga seems to be the best explanation then for what this would be. And Tumbaga's this kind of gold, copper, tin alloy that was used in Mesoamerica. And the reason why this is important is because the apologists today really, 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 really want the golden plate to be made out of Tumbaga. They really want it to be made out of Tumbaga, because if it's made out of Tumbaga, we can explain the dimensions and get the weight to match. We can even possibly make the whole writing thing maybe work if like basically they were doing QR code style etching. Like it gets into the realm of technically not impossible if it's Tumbaga.
Yeah.
If it's anything else, then it's South
Well,
Park is exactly
that
100%
clears
right.
it up for me.
But
Only
yeah,
issue with the Book of Mormon is this.
yeah, right. So the problem with Ziph being Tumbaga is that if the plates are made out of Tumbaga and Ziph is Tumbaga, then Ziph should not be called Ziph. It should be called gold, or like a golden metal, or it should be described as something that associates it with the same material that's used for the golden plates if it's Tumbaga. Now, an apologist could come back and say, well, Tumbaga differs the way that it's used differs based off of its composition and all of that. And okay, but it's still, you're trying to, like, at this point in time, you're just special pleat. Like, you're just saying it's Tumbaga because now Tumbaga can be anything. Tumbaga is now your catch-all for anything that doesn't fit. It's any metal. It is now any metal that doesn't fit, because it can be metal, because it can be composed of anything. It can look like anything, and therefore,
it can be anything.
Now
it's your wild card.
Now it's your gold aunties and your silver senums or whatever. That's what this is now. Like,
it sounds like you're trying to define supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It's whatever you want it to be.
That is exactly what this becomes. Like, you have now made Tumbaga a catch-all for anything instead of it actually meaning something within apologetics. And what do we call that when it comes to scholarship? Meaningless. It is just, you can't make, it's unfalsifiable. You can't do anything with it. And so what's the point? I don't care. At that point, you're just making stuff up. You're special pleading, and you don't have any evidence to back it up. This is apologetics for you. This is how apologetics works. You find something, you find the place where it could possibly fit, you squeeze it in, you hope it works, and when it doesn't, it's not your fault that it doesn't. You just have to be more faithful.
Even when I was an apologetic, I didn't have the energy to apologetic like this. I was just like, you know what? God will fix it. I can't answer that question. It's fine. It'll be all right. I was a very lazy apologetic.
A lazy learner and a lax disciple.
I was lukewarm. I got spat out.
I had a little bit of an engagement with Book of Mormon Central on their last video, where I was basically telling that, like, I was talking with them about how, like, the evidence that they were presenting was just not good. It was just very poor quality evidence. And they accused me, of course, of basically that no matter what they said, I would not be convinced. That I was just going to disagree with them and not believe no matter what evidence they presented. And I had to reply. I was like, no, it's not that. It's that the quality of your guys' evidence is poor. If you presented good evidence, I would accept the claim.
Believe it. Yeah.
Like, you have to present evidence that like, is sufficient for the burden of proof, and you're just not doing it. And you keep saying you think that you are because it works for you because you're predisposed to believing it. And any like,
Right.
if farts could
You've
prove
already
Moroni,
drank the
you would believe that farts prove Moroni. Like if you could
right.
somehow attach those two things together, you would, because it would work, because it would confirm your worldview that you it's not otherwise falsifiable, but you
Right.
just accept it out of hand. And anyway, that's what this is. And it's the same thing here. It's this apologetic playbook. It's tiresome, but the reason why I'm not going to accept this particular apologetic is not out of some like dogmatic opposition
Right.
to Tumbaga or anything like that, or to the Book of Mormon. It's
because it's
if
dumb.
you do this, you cannot
Yeah.
separate Tumbaga from anything else. You
Yeah.
can't separate Ziph from anything else. It becomes meaningless. You have rendered
Yeah.
this particular claim meaningless to the point that we can't actually use it to test anything. And
Because it's
yeah,
it's
because
definitionless.
it is a sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal, meaningless noise. And yeah, but this is the playbook. This is what comes
Yeah.
up in the playbook. It doesn't have to be a good answer; it just has to be an answer.
Yeah.
All right. So Wicked King Noah he's taxing the people, and the people are unhappy about it, and he's trying to make himself rich and all of that. And Abinadi gets kicked out of the city for basically saying that King Noah is bad. And
Rude.
so Abinadi throws on this robe and he sneaks into the city, and he's all careful about it and everything like that. And then he walks in the middle of the town square and he throws off his robe like a dragon style, and is like, aha, I am Abinadi. And like, I actually wish I was making that part up. He does in fact say that he is Abinadi.
So like I love that so much.
I am the guy you just kicked out of the city and threatened to kill.
For back in the day and not having telenovelas, they made their own drama. Abinadi,
This is very much like Pablo.
Exactly. Oh, gas in Spanish.
This is part of the reason why I do love this section, because it is so over the top dramatic, and I love it to pieces.
So happy.
I want a faithful Hollywood adaptation of the Book of Mormon just for stuff like this, because like I don't want it to be faithful in the sense of like faithful to the church. I want it faithful to what the text actually is and what the text is actually saying. Like don't modify it, don't clean it, don't make it like seem like a little more mild than what it or anything like that. No, do what the text says. And oh my gosh, I love this so much. Like unironically, I love this.
I'm already casting it in my brain. Hang on.
I love Abinadi just going to the city, and just like the thing that I used to like, even as a believer, as a missionary, I'd picture like that scene, like the trailer for Assassin's Creed, the first Assassin's Creed, where Altair is like jumping up in the middle of the town square to assassinate his target, like after doing all this careful sneaking and everything. Like that's what this is to me. It's just this like sudden, like high profile, like aha, I am here. And, I love this so much. It's great. Okay, so Abinadi does this, and not surprisingly, they're like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. We're gonna take you in front of the king. Okay. So they put him in a room, and then they take him to the king, and King Noah's got his priests together. And like throughout this narrative, we have King Noah and the priests. The guards basically disappear from the narrative, except to like show up in 17, where they bring him back into the room, where they bring Abinadi back into the room. And then they disappear again. Like every time they talk about like somebody trying to lay hands on Abinadi, it's the priests that are doing it. Every time that somebody tries to like object or to do something or to cause harm to Abinadi, it's the priests. Or it's Noah, right? Like it's one of those two groups, one of those two parties that is like engaging in this behavior against Abinadi. There are servants that are sent after Alma the Elder, who may or may not have been in the room. Like it's possible they weren't in the room, and then like when Alma the Elder like tries to escape, like through the open door, King Noah's like, get after him, and then the servants that are outside the room do that. Like the text leaves that space for us, and I'm just wanting to set the stage because it's going to be important later. Okay, So
Okay.
while Abinadi is in the room, he offers some messianic prophecies. He's going to talk about like this coming Jesus. And in 1333, he says that Moses had prophesied of the coming Messiah. And then he offers like this rhetorical challenge of like, well, haven't all the prophets done this and all, from the beginning and all of that. It's interesting that Mosiah 1333 has absolutely no cross references to this Moses prophecy of the coming
Yeah.
Messiah, of this coming atoning Messiah. No footnotes, no cross references.
Right.
Part of
Doesn't
it,
come up.
yeah. So part of this is because no such biblical prophecy exists, right? There's no prophecy in the biblical record where Moses is like saying, "Hey, this like atoning Messiah is going to come and redeem Israel" or anything like that. Like this never happens, and there are reasons why it doesn't happen that are long and complicated, but they include the fact that Moses never existed, and also that. And also like the character of Moses is rendered for a different purpose, right? Like it's a nationalist myth after coming out of the exile. Like Moses represents this salvation of Adonai already. He's already serving that role, and it's a parallel myth meant to associate the people coming out of the exile with like this earlier like development of this idea that they had come out of Egypt after being delivered from bondage in Egypt. Like, it's just these parallel ideas. If there ever was like a historical kernel for a Moses, it is in this like very small scale exodus that may have possibly happened, that would have involved maybe like a few hundred to a few thousand people coming into Canaan. And like that's it.
Okay.
It not anywhere close to the large scale exodus described in the biblical account.
Just ballpark, how many people did Moses lead out?
So in the Exodus record, it's somewhere like in the order of the millions of people that he led out of Egypt. In like actual history, the figure who would possibly have served as the inspiration for the character of Moses, if they existed, would not have led out more than a few hundred to a few thousand people.
Okay.
If that many, like a very small scale.
Right.
When I say a few thousand, that's probably too many.
Okay. No, but I mean, it gives me a visual,
I mean, we're orders of magnitude different between like the mythical Moses and like whatever that historical figure, if they existed, would have been.
But as far as for, I know we had talked about this in the pregame. There is more evidence to the actual historical Jesus existing, obviously not with his X-Man powers, but the person. That is, however, not the case with Moses, correct? Most likely was not a person. I mean, there was no Exodus or any of that.
Correct. Yeah. So that there is much more evidence to support the historicity of the figure who inspires the Jesus of the Gospels than there is to support the historicity of the person who inspires the Moses of the Pentateuch.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was.
I'm being careful with my words on this a little bit because
I'm trying to like.
It's going to make it seem like I may be coming across with like certain other positions, and there's some of these positions I'm just kind of agnostic on. The historicity of Jesus is one of those that I lean in the direction of most likely there was a historical figure who served as that inspiration, but the character in the Gospels is ahistorical. That's the direction that I lean. Which is not the same as a mythicist position. It's really actually one of the more conservative positions that is in line with the with mainline scholarship.
Got it.
So anyway, Moses, though, he basically seems to have been, if not entirely ahistorical, then the actual figure would have been so different from the biblical figure that it may as well be ahistorical.
I got in trouble. Moses got me in trouble, and I had to write lines in Vacation Bible School back in my Southern Baptist youth because I asked the preacher's wife who was teaching. I said, I was a smart ass little, I think I was about 8. And I said, I was really into Egyptology, as was the craze in the 80s. And I said, so where is Moses's mummy? And she said, what? And I was like, where is Moses's mummy? Like, he was an Egyptian prince, you know, even though he was Hebrew, but I mean, he was raised as he should be in the Valley of the Kings. Where's Moses' mummy? And she's like, well, it's just very complicated. And I was like, no, like, why aren't there hieroglyphics telling of his story? He did. I mean, that was kind of a big deal. You know, why,
Yeah.
where is his story? Where is his sarcophagus? Where is his any of that? And she's like, well, you've got to understand the scriptures. I was like, well, if that's a real thing that happened, there's got to be evidence somewhere. Where is it? And I got in trouble. I blame Moses.
Not only is there an absence of evidence for like a large Hebrew enslaved population in Egypt at the time that Moses would have existed, there is a great deal of evidence that opposes the idea of a Hebrew enslaved population at that time. We found like, you know, work records and stuff like that on tablets and all of that. And there is an absence of Hebrew slaves.
Because there were a ton of Egyptians doing the work and stuff.
Yep.
So,
or, you know, taken from other places that would have been easier to get to and all of that. And yeah, it doesn't line up. It doesn't line up. And I mean, this goes into like the fact that the Exodus story just doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. The conquest never happened. There are lots of issues with that particular story before. And so
Michael Jackson is the reason I don't believe in Santa Claus, and Moses is the reason that I don't believe in the Exodus. So I really feel like I'm being let down by a lot of my childhood heroes.
I hear that.
Freaking Michael Jackson and Moses. I'm done.
So while the Bible, Moses, doesn't actually prophesy of Jesus, the Pearl of Great Price, Moses does. Kind of, in a way. And I do find it interesting that there are no cross references to this. But anyway, if we're going to accept that Abinadi is referring to the Pearl of Great Price, Moses, we have to deal with some issues. And this is where we're going to have the Book of Moses that we have today bumping up against biblical scholarship. And specifically, I want to talk about the two creation accounts in Genesis. So, I mean, we could talk about how like the story of like Enoch that's in the Book of Moses is definitely derived from the story of Enoch that's in the Book of Moses is derived from the Book of Enoch and like other like later traditions and all of that. We could talk about those sorts of issues. But I do find that just the two creation accounts alone points to the fact that the whatever record Abinadi is referring to is not the Book of Moses that we have in the Pearl of Great Price. So the Book of Moses, in its first 4 chapters, is a pretty significant modification of Genesis 1 through 3. But it's also very obviously dependent on Genesis 1 through 3. And this isn't hidden. This is there. Like you can tell that this is a retelling of that creation account. And it's also pretty clear that what Joseph Smith is doing is he's going through and trying to create the inspired translation of the Bible. He's just taking the Genesis 1 through 3 story and it's becoming the Book of Moses. Like that's what's going on here. And that's pretty consistent as well with the faithful narrative. And they may use different terms.
I don't have a problem with that.
An apologist may use different terms, but they're going to arrive at the same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So what biblical scholarship has shown us, though, is that Genesis 1 through 3 is actually 2 separate creation accounts that are stitched together. You have the story in Genesis 1 until about verse 4 or so. That is one creation account. And then just welded together with that is the Genesis 2 through 3 account. In Genesis 1, you have Adonai like speaking things into existence, right? You have his spirit resting upon the waters of the formless void. And then he says, let there be light. And there was light. And he saw that it was good, right? You have like Adonai commanding things. And just by the power of his voice alone, creating. In the Genesis 2 through 4, or Genesis 2 verse 4 through like 3 and all that, it's a very different relationship with the creation. Adonai is getting his hands dirty. He's going down. He is molding things. He's creating things by hand. The most obvious example of this is that the Genesis 1, Adonai creates man and woman in his own image, male and female created he, them, all that. Like he just creates and they're there, and he's just speaking them into existence. The Genesis 2 Adonai goes down and he takes the dust and he forms out of the dust a man, and then he takes from the man, like he's like, oh, this dude is like alone and that is like not good. I need to resolve that somehow. Let me steal one of his ribs and fashion out of that rib a woman, and that's how he creates woman. And so that's how he goes about creating male and female, well, or men and women. So he Adonai in the one account, it creates man and woman, or he creates humans, right, in chapter 1, and then he goes through the whole process again and does it like physically.
Sure.
This is one of those signs that, like, these are two separate accounts, they're stitched together.
Yeah.
And this is also, we talked in the pregame a little bit about the Lilith tradition. This discrepancy with these two accounts is kind of one of those sources of the Lilith tradition. All right, obligatory Dan McClellan plug. There are plenty of videos of Dan McClellan talking about the Lilith tradition, where that comes from, and how all that developed. Those would all be really good for understanding how these two creation accounts played into that. Plenty of videos on
Dan who now?
Yeah. Dan Beecher, Dan Street, Dan. Dan Mattingly, Don, no. So what's funny is that the Book of Moses in the Pearl of Great Price is aware of this problem. It calls it out. Like, it is very much aware that there are these two creation accounts that are stitched together. And the way that it chooses to resolve this is by calling the first creation, the creation of Genesis 1, that has just gone through and quoted, the spiritual creation. And it says that all things need to be created spiritually before they could be created materially. And then it goes through and describes the material creation. The fact that it is aware, though, of these two accounts being stitched together, if we're going to take a critical lens on all of this, would point to the fact that this is just has literary dependencies on these two creation accounts, and is child to that, inherits that particular problem.
Right. Now we got to figure it out.
And part of what shines a light on this is that it doesn't say this beforehand, right? It's not until it bumps into this problem of these two creation accounts actually bumping into each other that it says, and everything was created spiritually first, and then we're going to create stuff materially. This isn't baked into the narrative. It's oh, now that I'm running into this problem, I have to fix this. Let me do this. Let me come up with this solution.
Crud. I got to figure this out.
Right. And so it fits more with that Joseph Smith's kind of standard operating procedure of fixing problems as they show up, rather than anticipating the issue and actually really addressing it. So yeah, it really just ends up shining a spotlight. To me, it's kind of funny that it just ends up shining a spotlight on this issue.
Yeah.
What this points to, though, is that the reason why these two accounts show up the way that they do is because of theological innovations that are happening before the exile and after. And so this story is being developed really starting before the exile and then working its way through to after. The Genesis 1 version is the later version. God is more powerful. He's higher up in the council. He's doing things just by speaking things with his voice. Where the Genesis 2 version of the story is lower. It's a more carnal God. It's more physical God. It's more flawed God. It's a God that's more consistent with really what the Near Eastern pantheons would have been like. Right. And, we see the same style of creation, even like Greek myth and all of that, right? This is just kind of the common way of doing things. We have, the God of Genesis 1 basically just completely dominates Leviathan, dominates chaos. There is no conflict there. There's no real challenge. This God is just too powerful.
I was going to say, just like the penultimate of power there.
The God of Genesis 2, 4, and later, right? That Adonai he has to struggle a bit more. He has to work for it. He's not aware of everything. He doesn't know where Adam and Eve are after they hide themselves, right? Like, and I know that there are apologetics that try to deal with that, but this is just what's happening in the story. Like, God doesn't know where Adam, he's, where art thou? Like, like why are you naked?
Ask
like,
for them.
Who told you that you are naked, right? Like, he's needing to ask these questions. And while apologetics would say, well, God's doing this, challenge them and all that, that is not what's intended by the original authors. All right.
Right.
All that to say, this is not what Abinadi is playing with. He is not playing with that Moses account. So what he's talking about is a prophecy that just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
These prophecies of Christ are just ones that, by Moses, are ones that don't exist. He's going to introduce even more biblical scholarship issues when he starts quoting directly with Deutero Isaiah. And we've talked at length already about the Deutero-Isaiah problem in the Book of Mormon. This is just
Yeah.
another version of the exact same issue, right? Because the only source we have for Isaiah is the brass plates. Those, so if it's not on the brass plates, if it couldn't have been on the brass plates, it's an anachronism. And so even though Deutero-Isaiah would have long been written by the life of Abinadi, he doesn't really have a way of actually receiving it unless we're gonna, create a bunch of other issues.
I was gonna say
we have to create
worms.
To fix the Deutero-Isaiah problem. We create so many other issues. So what I want to talk about instead is like how Isaiah 53 ends up getting used in Mosiah 14, but also more broadly in the Christian tradition. So the common trend here is to try and use this as a prophecy of Jesus Christ, that the suffering servant who's afflicted for our, wounded for our transgressions and all of that is Jesus. It's not. This is the nation of Israel. This is talking about Adonai's relationship and trying to comfort Israel following the exile, and how they're in these travails of the exile, the suffering and the anguish of being taken into captivity and all of that, and how Adonai is offering them atonement, offering them mercy, offering them grace, offering them love, compassion, comfort. Deutero-Isaiah is very much about that, right? This is an Adonai that, instead of being like the vindictive, powerful, destructive Adonai of Proto-Isaiah, this is a comforting Adonai. This is a comforting God that is seeking to succor his people and to love them and to give them the compassion and the safety and the sanctuary that they need. And that's just not an Adonai that appears in Proto-Isaiah. This is not talking about Jesus Christ. The evolution of the character of Jesus Christ invited this particular analysis to the Christians who were trying to establish their religion following the death of their apocalyptic preacher leader, who died under horrible circumstances that they completely did not anticipate when they expected him to overthrow the Roman powers. When that didn't happen, then they go back to this section in Deutero-Isaiah, recontextualize it, and build out this whole other version of what the Messiah figure is supposed to be. And Abinadi is anticipating that. And we talked about how that is actually anachronistic as well, and doesn't really fit with any sort of historical mold. It doesn't fit with you need Hellenistic ideas to start creeping into Judaism in order for these ideas to actually really start to congeal and to develop into the Christus figure that Jesus is going to occupy. In and of itself, with just vanilla pure Judaism, this doesn't work.
Now, I remember somebody telling me, and I'm going to be honest here, I don't remember. I know it was LDS related. I don't remember if this was when we were preparing for baptism or when we were preparing for endowments in the temple, that it was a situation where there is Jehovah God, or there is Adonai God, there is God, and then there is Jehovah, who is the Jesus figure, I guess. And that penultimate power is going to be Heavenly Father, whereas that more hands-on power is going to be Jesus. Is that?
So think back to the endowment, right? So you have Elohim, who commands Jehovah and Michael to, he commands Jehovah and Michael to go down and create the world like unto the other worlds that we have heretofore created, right? See, there is matter unorganized. Let us form it into a world like unto the other worlds we have heretofore created, right? So he goes through this process of creation where he commands to do something. He gives the pattern of the creation, and then Jehovah and Michael repeat it, and they actually execute that function. That is very much an LDS innovation on this idea. It's not something that appears in the Bible. It's not something that appears in the Book of Mormon. And it doesn't appear in Kirtland Mormonism either. This is you've got to have Nauvoo, you got to have the introduction of Masonry, you've got to have then the innovations on Masonry, then you have to go through the Utah period and Brigham Young really finalizing all of it before you get to that point. And then you get things like Adam God, because that becomes a certain implication out of all of this. That's how this evolves and changes and gets modified over time. It's not this, right? But it's actually a really good example of how these sorts of things get out of that particular control, right? So you have this idea in Deutero-Isaiah, right, of the suffering servant that is Israel, and somehow this becomes Jesus Christ over time, and then that just gets stuck in the imagination. Well,
Yeah.
it's going to be the same thing when you talk to like a member of the church, where if they've been through the endowment, they're going to understand like, the Genesis accounts with the spiritual creation and then the physical creation, and Elohim setting forth the spiritual version of it. And then Jehovah and Michael carrying out the actual
The
like
physical.
the physical
Yeah.
creation under the directions, and then reporting back up to Elohim, and Elohim then declaring that it is good once that particular act is done. Yeah, that's exactly how they seek to resolve all of this. But that is a later innovation. That is not something that is present in the text, nor was it intended by the original writers.
So I was going to say that would not be something that would have been in Joseph Smith's wheelhouse and all.
Oh
that.
no, and he's not putting it in, right? Like that's not at all what he's putting in.
That's why I was like,
he's going to develop that over time, right? Like it takes time before he gets to that point of that even being close. So 1829 Joseph is not going to come up with that. 1843, 1844 Joseph, yeah, he's starting to really move into those ideas. But that is, that's 15 years of engaging in this space and coming up with ideas and throwing them out there and getting them challenged and pushing back and all of that. Yeah,
it's an evolution.
It is an evolution, and we're able to track that evolution through time. We can see that in Lectures on Faith, we have still sort of a pseudo-Trinitarian idea of God the Father having a body of spirit and Jesus the Son having a body of flesh and bone, and them existing as distinct personages, but kind of more modes of the Trinity. But we're moving out of Trinitarianism at that point because 1834. We still haven't evolved into the idea of them being, two personages of flesh and bone, and then the Spirit being a personage of spirit, not having a body of flesh and bone like we have in 1843, right? These are ideas that are evolving slowly over time, and the first vision accounts line up with that evolution.
Got it.
Sorry, there was a video. There was a Mormonism with the Murph video that I was following for about 30 minutes, and then I think he was doing that with Faith Matters, Church History Matters.
Oh,
one of those apologists, and I was just like, I got through about 30 minutes of it, and I had to be like, I'm sorry, I'm done. These guys are.
I couldn't.
They are being very intellectually dishonest through all of this.
Yeah.
And one of them worse than the others, but. But that's okay, because just to show Stephen Murphy how serious I am about treating his videos, I am working on outlining a very long video responding to his 10 best evidences of the Book of Mormon. So already shaping up to be a mammoth of a video. Okay. So yeah, this Christian reading of Isaiah 53 gets inserted directly into the text by Abinadi. And it's just important to note that what we're seeing in this is not, it's anachronistic in terms of having Abinadi quoting Deutero-Isaiah in the first case, but then it's an anachronistic understanding of that chapter anyway, because the later Christian innovations do not happen without the influence of like Hellenistic ideas.
Got it.
All right, so question. We've set the stage. I haven't been able to figure this out. So how were Abinadi's words recorded? I can account for most of them. So we have Abinadi going into the town square, right, throwing off his cloak and saying, haha, I am Abinadi. And that is what happens. And we can account for those words, right? Like anybody in the public could have recorded those. It could have been word of mouth that, basically instilled what was said there. All right. So then we get into the court. And as far as I'm aware in the court, we only have King Noah, the priest, and Abinadi. No one else is actually specified as being in the court. And certainly nobody who would have been capable of recording the words other than the priests, King Noah, and Abinadi is going to die. So he can't really record it.
Right. Can't do. Not gonna be
and King Noah is not exactly incentivized to record it. So it really, that's got to be somebody among the priests.
Yeah.
The priests are a problem because they're all going to run away and die. And so there's no real reason to think that their records are going to be, in any way like propagated such that Limhi and Gideon and Mosiah 21 are going to be able to be aware of what Abinadi taught.
Right. What happened?
And this is actually the real problem, is Limhi and Gideon being aware of Abinadi's words and whatever it is that Limhi and Gideon prophesies of. So that's what we're going to have to resolve. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we can resolve that particular issue, but we're still going to have a hole in this overall narrative. All right. So Then we have Alma the Elder in the room for like basically the stuff that's in that court until he gets kicked out of the court at the beginning of Mosiah 17. He can
Right.
be aware of all of that. And it does say in Mosiah 18 that he passes the word around. He starts teaching what Abinadi taught and all of that. So we have our source at least for those few chapters, and that is
That
Alma
part.
the Elder. Okay. From Mosiah 17:5, we have the guards bringing Abinadi into the room, and then they disappear from the narrative entirely. So I'm assuming, just because the narrative doesn't give me any other real option, that they're not
They
involved
left.
in this. They left.
Yeah.
Right. And this seems to be the case because it's always the priests that are laying hands or attempting to lay hands on Abinadi. It's always them that are kind of interacting. They're the ones that scourge him. They're the ones that do all the stuff to him. It's always
Very
said as the
aggressive.
priests doing it. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And then Abinadi says a few things in that room that there's nobody to record, and yet it's recorded. And then they go into a public space where they, ultimately execute him. They burn him to death, and he prophesies one last time. And those final prophecies are public, and so somebody in the public, like Limhi or Gideon, could have heard that, could have recorded that. But there is that space between between Abinadi's final, like his sentencing and his actual execution.
I appreciated your slip there, by the way.
Yeah, we just can't quite account for who recorded that. So how were those words recorded? I don't actually have an answer. And why this is a problem for me, besides it being just kind of a scholarship problem, is that Joseph Smith is actually usually really good about this. He's usually actually quite good about saying, hey, this is where this was ultimately captured. This is who recorded it. And what I think happened is that he finished all of the story of Abinadi, and then he jumps over to Alma, and he says that Alma the Elder is spreading around what Abinadi taught. And that just resolves it in his mind. He's got it. He's got it covered because Alma the Elder is recording it. And it just doesn't occur to him that there is this hole that is present, that there isn't somebody to really record what was going on here.
Yeah.
I think that that's the most parsimonious explanation of what happened here, because he usually is better than that. But I also think that now we're a little bit earlier in the process. I don't know that he has Oliver Cowdery with him right now to help. I think that this is probably one of those phases where he's working with Emma or David Whitmer. But at this point, he may have Oliver Cowdery with him,
right?
Because I think that the story of Alma the Elder baptizing Helam, that's going to come from the next section, is part of what inspires the baptism questions that he and Oliver go with that in May. And so I think this might be where that part comes from. But it's also possible that it's not until like Oliver is going through and copying down stuff for like the printer's manuscript that question comes up as well. So that it's possible he's just going back and copying down was done before. I think without having like the original manuscript, it would be hard to say who's doing what. And I'm not sure that we have this section in the original manuscript.
Yeah,
might have to do a little bit of research into that with the Joseph Smith Papers project to see whose handwriting we've got with that. But so much of that was destroyed. So unfortunately,
man, I was gonna say that's so just wasn't destroyed. It was taken back to heaven.
No, the original manuscript actually like has water damage.
Oh, okay. So that part. Okay, I thought you meant the heavenly part.
Yeah, not the golden
plates.
Yeah, I'm talking about the actual original manuscript. So yeah, that's why this is interesting to me. Mostly is because Joseph is usually better about this, and in this section he's just not. And I'm wondering why that happened.
I tend to agree with you on that. It's just early in the process, and he hasn't gotten it very perfected yet.
Yeah, it's just a gap. It's just a gap that it does exist in the text, and I'm a little bit disappointed that it's there because he's actually usually pretty good about closing these up.
Well, and it's just one more thing to kind of back up the Mosiah theory,
Yep, it does give credence to Mosiah priority. Okay. So let's talk about Sherem and the priests of Noah. So you may be wondering, wait a minute, who's Sherem? I've forgotten. Well, if you think back to a couple of weeks ago when we talked about Jacob chapter 7, Sherem was that first Antichrist in the narrative.
I just really feel like he should be more remembered. If you're going to be an antichrist, that's kind of a big deal.
Just do something a little bit more interesting, right?
Right.
Well, now if you're thinking, okay, so Sherem is that first antichrist, okay, that's cool and interesting, but why are we talking about Sherem and the priests of Noah together? Like, that seems kind of silly to me. These are different people. You're right. However, they make pretty much the exact same arguments. So Sherem's story is a lot shorter than the story of the priests of Noah, and that needs to be held into account. But basically what their arguments whittle down to is, aha, Mr. Prophet guy, you say that you believe in this Jesus Christ figure, but we believe in the law of Moses, and we think that the law of Moses is sufficient for salvation. And if you're saying that the law of Moses is not sufficient for salvation, you're the one committing a heresy. Haha. Okay. So in Sherem's case, we talked about some of the issues with that and all of that, and it is what it is. In this story with the priests of Noah, they should have been aware of the story of Sherem, or at least Abinadi should have been aware of the story of Sherem and Jacob, right? Like he should be referencing Jacob's sermon to the priests of Noah if they're going to be making the exact same arguments that Sherem makes.
Right.
But he doesn't. Now, Jacob is much more concise. He spends a lot less time going through all of this, but there's no reference at all to what Jacob says to Sherem in anything that Abinadi has to say. And there just should be, because this is actually part of their history. It's part of their records. It's part of who they are. And while, the Jacobian line is the one that's holding on to the small plates. Like, come on, this is a big event. Like the first major prophet, non-prophet or non-king prophet of the Nephites stood up in front of an antichrist in public and offered this like stirring defense of Jesus Christ.
Right.
This should be a huge part of like the Christian myth, the Christian story that's evolving among the Nephites.
Like
and so when Zenith go off, like they should be aware that the story should go with them. Like if Deutero-Isaiah is going to go with them, like a story within their own among their own actual people should also go with them.
Absolutely.
Okay. What this actually shows is that the large plates are just blind to the small plates. They just are not aware of anything that the small plates have to say. And this is, again, consistent with RFM's latest episode about the Nephite kings disappearing. The large plates are blind to what the small plates have to say, where they should be explicitly referenced because the exact same arguments are being made. There's just no mention at all of this story. And it would have been a really good defense, right? It would have been like, look, do you not remember like Jacob? Do you not remember the brother of like our first king who spoke unto the Antichrist and who said unto him, like, you know, all of this, and showed unto him a sign that such that he was struck dumb or such that he was, you know, struck down and did not again recover his strength. And yea, that he
defeated an Antichrist,
that his very soul should be cast down unto hell for you know, like this is what should actually be showing up, and it's not. So yeah, this is evidence that the large plates are just blind to the small plates. All right, so what can we conclude from this section overall? Well, we have that Zeniff's account and Amaleki's account of the exact same events have subtle but meaningful differences that really just point towards single authorship. We also have that the role of a seer, as described in the Book of Mormon, presents significant challenges to the LDS organizational structure. We have Ziff as just being perfectly on brand with the Book of Mormon apologetics. And I think that the most controversial point that I really have to raise today is that Abinadi was a witch, and he deserved what happened to him, because that's what we do with witches. We burn them. Abinadi summoned scriptures out of space-time. Clearly, he is just as the necromancer of Endor, and he was a witch and deserved to die.
That's the greatest thing ever. And I mean that, you know what? Yeah, I'm on brand. I think I remember that that footnote being in my quad. It's been a few years. Oh my stars. So yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's basically just doctrine at this point.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of saying, prove me wrong.
Well, that's what I have for us on this.
I love it.
On this episode. If there's nothing else, Thank you all so much for joining us. This is fun as always. I will be in a different place next week. So we'll do what we can. I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to handle all the recording and everything, but it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks here. But we'll be doing our best to be here for you guys as we continue on finishing up Mosiah and then getting into the Book of Alma. So it should be.
Well, and Perry, I just want to give you peace of mind that if for some reason you are unable to record, I will be here and just tell about an hour and a half full of knock jokes.
Okay. Well, you heard it here. If I'm going to hold you to that. If I am not able to make it, you are going to have an hour and a half video of Lolo just telling knock jokes.
I don't see a downside. There's not one.
Honestly, like subscribe to our Patreon and support the great work that we're doing here. Oh gosh. All right. Well, if you stuck with us this long, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share with all the neighbors, and share up and down the Mordor. Just remember, we were very uncontroversial and perfectly acceptable and reasonable in this one. And feel free to share this with my stake president, and we'll see you all next time. And come follow me with Lolo and Perry. We'll see you.